So
Ooh. Oh shit, we
so
did
how
it.
so how do I
Use my French.
so how do I
Yeah, just
reverse
make your
that? So
you're
what?
back.
How do I do that?
Yeah, we're grouped.
Maybe. Oh,
Yeah,
I
we
see.
are in.
I
Yeah,
see right there.
yeah, the little
Done,
circle.
done, done.
Who's that? Where's my dog? Come on.
Found the
All
way.
right.
Okay,
Summary of last time.
there we go.
Behind the fence. Life behind the fence.
I see you, and I still hear you now. Right? Are
All right.
we
My name is
good?
Jesse Page Thomas. Yeah, Jesse Page Thomas. This is we had technical difficulties that were like 40 minutes late, but we're gonna get this out because people need to hear this no matter what. Ricky, author of Life Crimes and Hard Times of Ricky Atkinson, leader of the Dirty Tricks Gang. Salute.
How you doing, my
Well known.
brother? Yeah.
Yeah. So let's give the world a cultural background because this really summarizes the last thing. So
Let me get that.
the last segment, part one.
We are. So there
Yeah.
we go.
Took a lot to
Great.
get here.
Yeah, I'm good to go now.
All right.
For all the
You hear
technical
me?
problems that we have, I hear you loud and clear.
All right.
I also
Let's
see
get it now.
you. Yeah, I also see you and above me. Anyways,
Yeah.
yeah. So you want to know
Cultural
something about my history?
background.
So my cultural
Yeah.
background is I'm an Afro-Métis, which means that I'm black, indigenous, with something else in it. My something else is Ukrainian. My mother's Ukrainian. Her mother and father came from the Ukraine, I think, in the early 1900s, and
Yeah.
of course, Ukraine was at war then as it is now. So the reasons for my grandparents coming over here, I don't know because they never discussed it with me. And my grandfather barely spoke English to us kids during my lifetime with him. My sister says when I was in jail, he learned English and spoke English with her, but he didn't with me. So I really didn't hear him speak English my whole life, although I went to their house often. So my oldest black ancestor, which is my maternal grandmother. She's a state, and her lineage goes back to the Bulls. So her oldest ancestor that she would know about, that's written down in the Book of Negroes and other periodicals about that time, is Jonathan Bowles. So Jonathan Bowles is the Rock's great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, also ours. And he was born in 1755 in, I think, North Carolina, and fought against the Americans for the British. And of course, the British lost, so he had to get out of town. So he vacated America for Canada in 1883 and landed in Amherst View, Nova Scotia. In the Book of Negroes, they talk about two slaves that also got on the ship and came to Halifax. Don't know if those Atkinsons that were mentioned there, they're our relatives or our relatives came from some other place where Atkinsons were. The name Atkinson is pretty predominant in British slave history, would say, or we'll say British history per se, because he traveled on the ship with Captain Cook. So Captain Cook, who first navigated the world, and on the ship with him was a guy named Atkinson. I don't know his position on the ship. He had to have had a high position because that family had a lot of money, bought a lot of land around the world, or acquired a lot of land, or stole a lot of land as they traveled around the world. And so there's lots of people in
Depends
Jamaica,
on how you look
Trinidad.
at it, because depends on how you look at it, because whose land is it, right? I'm not sure.
So don't forget that's called colonization 400 years ago.
Yes.
They stole the land. That's they stole it, manipulated people into selling it, if that's the case. And anyways, he was a major landowner. So lots of Atkinsons around the world that have a slave history background, if you go back far enough, from the West Indies, from other places in the world where the British had landed. Right. So that's my lineage. So my family comes from Nova Scotia primarily. My mother was in Sudbury. That's where her mother and father were. So, but my history is Nova Scotian. We never talked much about my mother's history or her mother and father or her grandparents, my grandparents. We talked more about my father's history. It had a greater impact on us growing up in that environment, growing up in the black environment. We never mentioned our indigenous roots. My grandmother never said a single word about her indigenous roots, and no one in my family mentioned it, and that's primarily because if you left a reserve back then, you lost all rights. You left a reserve and married a black guy, you lost all rights, and then put yourself in this other position in society that made you struggle harder.
Categorize yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
They labeled you.
So they didn't even.
Back then.
So she didn't even talk about it. It's and now everybody's talking about. So I have Cherokee in my blood through the Croxons. The Croxons have Cherokee in them. They're my closest relatives, I guess. My
Yeah.
great uncles and my great aunts and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So we have Mi'kmaq and Cherokee in us, and I have
Yeah.
Ukrainian in me, and of course African in me. But I was raised
Yeah.
black
And it's
in a black community with a black father, so that's how I know no other way except that
yeah.
I was them. I wasn't separate from them. There's the old saying, if you're black, get back. If you're yellow, you're mellow. If you're white, all right. That didn't impact me because I never looked at myself that way. I looked at myself as only black because society taught me to look at myself that way. There was no other out for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's why I like to get to like the Regent Park, Dalmau Court. Like, which neighborhood was built first in Canada?
Regent Park was
it
built first. Didn't have a lot of black people in it. The blacks primarily settled. The first black church was at Yonge in the water's edge, and it was a tent. So it was in the West End that the blacks migrated to. It was the Spadina area. The Black Baptist Church is on Huron Street, just north of Dundas. It's been there for forever, a couple hundred years anyways. So the West End of Toronto was blacker, the best way to put it, than the East End of Toronto, which was British, Irish, and Scottish, Cabbagetown. So there was greater multiculturalism and multiracial groups here in the West End than there were in the East End. So what I say is I'm from the downtown West End of Toronto, which was the most multiracial spot on the planet. We had everybody within a few blocks of us, Italian, Portuguese, Greeks, Ukrainians, Germans, everybody, right? Within 10 minutes walking distance from where we grew up on Spadina Street.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that leads into my next one. Like, remember when our experience in Montreal, I've been to the system underworld, and like I basically went on a Montreal vacation all through the underground, you know what I'm saying? So I popped out, I seen the landscape. I read that in your book, you seen the landscape, it was familiar territory. That's why I had to figure out, was it P&F or Regent Park? So it's Regent Park number one.
Regent Park was first, Alexander Park was second. And keep in mind, 1968, the Immigration Act changed, allowing more people of color from around the world to come to Canada. So for us growing up as kids until 1968, our experiences were primarily with Canadian blacks and American blacks. We didn't see South American blacks. We didn't see many West Indian blacks at the time, and we didn't see any whatsoever African blacks in our community. That came after 1968. The doors open, and the sounds changed, the smells changed, the girls changed for us kids. Yeah.
For sure. Had you known back then that you would have been defining an era right now to watch it, like, like all the structure, like we already know there's too much to be said right now that there's a structure and a way things work. And the originators come from all y'all with the golden gloves. And we got to talk about the Montreal trip. I took my Montreal. I did not have the journey you did. So let's let the world know about your Montreal time.
Well, I was paroled. My first parole as an adult, my first parole as a juvenile would have been into the Toronto area. I was paroled as a juvenile in the Toronto area from my juvie experiences. And also there, I write in my book that I suffered a parole violation. We call it a probation violation when you're a juvie. And they took me and put me in foster care. And they wrote a letter to my mom and said that they thought that I would be better off if I was in an all-white environment rather than this multiracial Afro-Métis environment that I was growing up in. And they literally took me, put me in a white person's home. They weren't bad people, but they were also related to some of the gangbangers in Regent Park that we had beefs with. So I'm like, I can't stay here. I'm in enemy territory, right? So I violated my parole on purpose, or my probation on purpose, and got sent back to the joint because I knew that if that happened, I could come out differently, and I knew I wouldn't suffer a lot or stay there long. And then I popped back out when I was just turned on my 16th birthday. They cut me loose because technically I was an adult. And in my book, I wrote that they really wanted to help me, but they didn't know how. And they said that we don't know how to help you. You're going to have to help yourself. We think you're smart enough that you.
Without the curriculum.
Yeah, so they released me at 16 years old. So my Montreal trip is that when I got arrested at 17, because just think that's only just like 14 months later, I'm arrested, shoot out with the police. I go to prison, and when I get out of prison, I elect not to go back to Toronto. because I wanted to clean up my act, flip my switch is what I always call it. So I had an uncle in Montreal that was a business owner. He had a dry cleaners, and I went to Montreal to work in his dry cleaners and box. And so I was boxing in Montreal, became the Montreal champ on my first fight, and then the Quebec champ a few fights later.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, that's always been like anytime I touch a ring, you'd be like, yo, what up, cuz? And then you'd be like, yo, don't fuck with that guy. That guy got golden gloves.
Yeah, I could fight, but we could fight because we come from a fighting family. We come from the biggest boxing family in Canada, going back hundreds of years, right? So Sam Langford is in our distant family. So he's a guy that was going to fight Jack Johnson, and Jack Johnson was actually afraid to fight him. And then we go back to Dave Downey, the family where they got Dave Downey, Sugar Ray Downey won a brave bronze medal. Dave Downey was one of the more illustrious middleweights Canada ever produced, all the way to Kirk Johnson, another Scotian. Then you got Kevin and Donnie Downey that were amateur champs during my era. And then you got little Billy Downey that was Billy Downey did a lot of time, so a lot of people know him. But he was a really, really good fighter before crack cocaine grabbed him and wouldn't let him go. You know, so we come from that sporting family. We're all big strapping guys like The Rock. We're all big football players. Ricky Johnson, my cousin, he was a football player. That's The Rock's uncle. So the Rock's father and The Rock's uncle, they both boxed, but then gravitated towards wrestling. And then, of course, you know that history through The Rock, right? Well, yeah.
So how does one young Scotian now get into the heritage?
If someone would get into boxing, yeah, it's easy to get into boxing. Boxing
cultural title, right?
Through boxing, because you're making noise, moving stuff around.
From your culture. Sorry?
Say that again.
So from being extracted from our culture, prison, or it could be like just distraction. How does one get back into their culture, knowing their heritage?
Well, the thing is, and that's difficult. That's a difficult question to answer generically for everybody. You have to do it more individually. How does individuals get back? As more Nova Scotians gravitate towards learning their history, they also feel the Indigenous part of it. And if you feel the Indigenous part of it, you're biracial, then you must also feel the third part of it, which is the white part of you, which not a lot of people, especially Nova Scotians, we don't talk about that. But we love our relatives, and we give our relatives hugs, and we understand all of this, the racial dynamic that we're in. So the thing is a person that's holistic, they acknowledge all their ancestors. And here's the thing about genetics and culture and ancestry. We're all related if we go back 250,000 years. So how do you want to cut time? Do you want to cut time at 500 years, colonialism and the African diaspora and all that, and the mixture of the indigenous population with the forced African population, with the colonial masters inseminating and getting people pregnant, causing these divisions? Or do you want to go back 250,000 years and say, what difference does it make? We're all one people, one culture. Basically, we're all from the planet Earth, right? So we could take that approach, but there's a condition called tribalism, and we as Nova Scotians, we understand that because someone across the road, down the street, by the creek, is different than us, even though they look like us, talk like us, do all the same stuff we do. We've convinced ourselves that they're different, and we'll beef with them. And that's a human condition that's predestined in us. It's our genetics. And it goes back to the beginning of our time. So even if you had a real harmonious, really happy place somewhere, eventually fragmentation will happen, splits will happen, beefs will happen, and that community then will split up and move different directions, which is how we populated the entire planet. From that. So the thing, when I look at culture, I look at history because I study history. I mean, I'm a history buff, so I study history a lot. And it's like, we're just looking at it in a time. Most people in the world know, I wouldn't say everybody, but I'd say 60% of the people in the world that understand genetics know that all people come from Africa first and then migrated out to other places in the world second. So when you say that and you say, what's our culture, you have to be more specific, and then it narrows it down to what you really believe, what you think. Keep in mind, only 2 generations ago, you had 32 grandparents and great-grandparents. and the generation after that, you had 64 great grandparents. Where did they all come from around the world? All those 64 people. All of them make up you. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So your interest in being first grievance clerk. We're speaking on that. So like,
so if you
how
go
does
to
the parole, the word in French? The word in French is parole. That's why it's significant. Parole, you know, like how does the word of a man from Toronto and his experience good enough to get people off of their shit?
yeah,
right
I've been
now?
on parole.
Grievances,
I've been paroled a lot. Matter of
Yeah.
fact, I got sentenced to this really humongous sentence because I was paroled a lot in the past, and the judge was just tired of it and said that I had manipulated my parole officers, which is not the case. You have to say that all of them were just stupid. They weren't stupid, obviously. Some of them have degrees. Some of them are pretty smart. There's a game that you play when you're on parole. Parole is a contract you make with a portion of the government, and the portion of the government you make that contract with is called Correctional Service of Canada. It's a signed contract. You agree to the conditions of the parole. You're still serving the sentence. The police arrest you, turn you over to the courts. After you've been found guilty and sentenced, if the court sentences you to federal time, 2 years or more, you will be on parole at some time in that sentence for those 2 years. It may be the first day you get to prison. They may release you 2 days after you get to prison. Unusual, but it has happened. And then the rest of your sentence is parole. You may be due 2/3 of your sentence, and then you'll be forced out on what's called mandatory parole, even though you earned the good time by being nice, by behaving yourself in prison. You're forced to do your good time a second time. It's called double jeopardy. And then you're forced to do your parole either in a halfway house, a community facility, or in your own house, which is full parole. So I've been paroled a lot. So what parole to me is, in that contract, and we have a pretty good system. There's, I'd say 95, 94% of all the people incarcerated in Canada at one time will make some kind of parole, some kind of conditional release prior to the expiration of their sentence. Some guys don't want to get out if they're doing short sentences. They don't want to get out because they have too many negative concerns on the street, primarily by the police. And they'd rather finish their sentence and just book it, go wherever they want, anywhere in the world that they can go, they can go, rather than try to navigate parole and chance getting arrested, set up again.
Like if it's not for you, go to your warrant or go to your stat, try to.
So what it is that you used to be able to do that, and then they created mandatory parole because people were, the public was crying that people weren't treated when they were coming out, so it's forced treatment. Does it work? I'd say no. What works is you change yourself. They give you tools to do that. It's hard for them to change you. In my case, they can't. They even said they can't correct me, and that's their job, Correction of Canada. So they said I have to find a way or a program or a means to correct myself because I'm a repeat offender. I've been 12 times on the parole board, so keep that in mind. And for most of my crimes are big crimes. They're not little crimes like stealing a car. They're armed robberies and major criminal activity, right? And I was still able to get out. So
let's go. Let's go to the airport. You want to go to the airport? Let's talk about use of force.
Yeah, so I was arrested at the airport on my last foray for a conspiracy to import with a couple of boxing buddies of mine from the island of St. Kitts. And known to the RCMP, we had connections in the airport, i.e. relatives who worked there. I've got relatives in law enforcement. We had some crooked people at the airport, won't say who they are, that were willing to do some stuff for us. So the RCMP SWAT team swooped in without telling airport security because they didn't know which airport security we had in our pocket. And when they arrested me, the guy they ran at us with the guns, and the guy smacked me in the head with a machine gun. I turned around, the other guy smacked me in the head with a machine gun.
They're trying to make you forget anything you know.
No, they were
quick amnesia with a fucking butt of a gun.
They were trying to incapacitate me with an extreme amount of force. That's the best way to put it. When I'm in the airport, all they got to do is walk up to you and say, "Mr. Atkinson, you're under arrest. Can you come with us?" They didn't have to dramatize the arrest, and that's what it was. To do something. I'm in the airport. Obviously, if you're in the airport, they can just walk up to you and snatch you up. Yeah, just like they do anybody else in the airport, right? So anyways, that when you talk about use of force and beatings, tortured and beaten by the police is something that that happen, and it's
Yeah.
part of the game. If you're in the game of criminality, then you accept it. Hey, man, what happened? And it's almost like making your bones. Yeah, what happened to you? How come you got a black eye? Officer so-and-so picked me up, punched me in the eye, wanted to know who you were. What'd you say? That's what I got the black eye for. I didn't say anything. You know, that kind of stuff. So in the cops that were police during my young teenage years and my juvenile years, those cops have been on TV or in newspapers saying that, yeah, we were really heavy-handed during those days. Here's the difference. I'd rather get punched in the mouth by a cop, even if it's illegal, than shot by the same cop, even if it's illegal. And that's the difference now. So the young brothers now are getting shot rather than slapped out. And that's the difference of policing now. They're more afraid. So keep in mind, I've shot at the police. I've had shootouts with them. I've shot at them. They've shot at me. We've played this game for a long, long time. And then when we hang up our guns, the cops, I see cops now that are retired. They've hung up their guns. They know that I've hung up my guns. I'm not banging anymore. So it's like they look at me, they treat me differently as if we were friends. Keep in mind, I can't be your friend if you shot at me before. I don't know how they feel about that, but I feel that I really can't be your friend because you shot at me.
I don't know what they're trying. I don't get it. No.
So what it is they're seeking peace and tranquility in their retirement years, and they're hoping that I would be the same way, right? So it's some weird stuff. So I've had cops do some weird stuff. I mean, when I was 11 years old, one punched me in the mouth, and that changed my life because then I said my father's going to kick his ass because my father was one of the toughest guys in the downtown core and stood out as such because he was a military sergeant and carried a lot of weight amongst our large family. And he said, I will kill that N-word if he raises his hand towards me. And that set me off. So my father's a military guy. The next night I went and said, Dad, I'm joining Army Cadets. And I did. And I became a marksman really quick because I studied. And that's what I wanted to do. I had a military father. And my primary purpose of learning to shoot weapons was to protect the community, was to protect my father, i.e. from white racist cops, and protect the community. And then I was in training school. I was in training school for shooting at a cop at 14 years old. And after training school, I went there. They were trying to correct me again. And while in training school, I indoctrinated myself into black history, more black politics, the books of the time, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Franz Fanon, Richard Rice.
Come on. Daniel Sampson. Say their name.
Well, Daniel Sampson was someone that was hung by the government for a crime that he didn't do. So Eldridge Cleaver was a book that I read over and over, Soul on Ice. It's right behind me right now. I have it. So Eldridge Cleaver was a powerful book. So he was talking. He was he was in the Black Panther Party, and while he was in prison, he talked how to comport yourself in prison, how to do time, literally facing time for shooting at cops and the stuff Panthers were doing. At the time when I was that young teenager, there was lots of black Muslims up here from the Nation of Islam, but now it was Farrakhan heads that. Elijah Muhammad headed our day. So we were selling Elijah Muhammad was Muhammad Speaks newspapers. We were also selling Black Panther newspapers. We were also selling Contrast newspapers, all these white radical stuff. I used to sell on the street. I used to sell on the street Chairman Mao's Little Red Book, the communist book, on how to do communist revolution. It was literally a how to take over a government, how to comport yourself within the umbrella of communism. So all that stuff was impacting me at the time. And at the same time, I wanted to be a thief. It's hard to explain to people. My dream was to be a thief. I watched the movie Thomas Crown Affair. I see it again. At least 200 times I've seen that film. This was the one with Steve McQueen, Faye Dunaway. So what it was, he was a master thief.
They did a remake
and to me,
with Pierce Brosnan or something.
Later. But to me, moving around in the downtown core of Toronto, in the manufacturing hub of Canada, in the financial hub of Canada, we met a lot of people that were thieves. There were some in our family, but in that community, we met them through my connections in my family and the people I knew on the street. And to me, they were the coolest guys. They didn't bow down to anyone. They didn't work for anyone. They were self-employed at what they did. And so I became a safecracker, a diamond thief.
There's no breaking it off. It's your take. There's no break-offs.
Exactly.
It's your take.
We used to steal art diamonds first from the neighborhood. And then because of the indoctrination in the Black Panther politics, or we say Black revolutionary politics at the time, I was spewing that stuff. I was talking that Last Poet stuff, Last Poets rap. They were the first rap group, and I was saying that, talking that. When the revolution comes, you'll know it's revolution time because there will be no commercials, all this kind of stuff. And so I got to the attention of the man, and a black CIA agent came upon us. He had first tried to nail some West Indian intellectuals. One was Rosie Douglas, who ended up becoming the Prime Minister of Dominica. So they tried to nail him, blew up a computer system in Montreal, and he was charged for that. So was Ann Cools, another sister from Montreal. She ended up being a senator, retired a few years ago. And so these were the people that the COINTEL, the CIA program of the United States, the COINTEL program, infected Canada. And so Warren Hart couldn't nail, this black CIA agent couldn't nail Rosie Douglas. So then he came upon us. We were younger, more impressionable. We were young teens, 14 to 17 years old. And then we started robbing banks and robbing for him because that was his forte. That's what he liked best. So he taught us the robbery business when we were really jewel thieves and sneak thieves and pickpockets and stuff like that. We weren't gangster robbers at the time. But through the training that he gave, and he gave us training, he was a military expert. He was a demolition expert. He was an expert in teaching people. He was a captain in the Army. He was an expert in teaching people how to do the military thing, which was terrorism. Yeah. He taught us those terrorist techniques, which, after I learned them and I went to prison, I came out of prison bitter on my first parole. I employed those techniques against the citizenry of Canada. I was the first guy to make spike belts, and I used spike belts to thwart the police. We also used bombs as primary diversionary devices and doing our scores and all these kind of tactics we used that we learned from this government agent hired by the Pierre Trudeau government during the late 60s. So that kept me going on that criminal path over and over and over again. The reason that it was hard to stop, because we grew up in a unique position in Canada in the West End core because of the multiracialism, but also the mob. When you look at the mob and the mob influences in my life, Paul Volpe, he was the first major mob guy.
Paul Volpe?
Yeah, member of the Bonanno family. Yeah, they were from the Magadino Buffalo crew to the Bonanno crew in New York City. He was one of their guys. So he was a top dog. But he was the first Italian guy to have a multiracial crew under his belt, as if they were made guys. He pulled in, you see the movies, you're made in that crew. He pulled in Jews and blacks and Irish and different guys out of the Spadina area to run his criminal empire. And he's, there's lots of ink about him because he's a real ballsy guy, and he was progressive in the terms we have to work with these other racial groups in order to survive and get along. He was the first guy that had that kind of thinking. Because he had that kind of thinking, it impressed upon me that maybe one day I could be in his clique. So we did stuff to ingratiate ourselves to that subculture, that criminal subculture. So it was hard. So it was hard,
right?
Exactly. So it was hard, as I was building my resume, as you put it, it was hard for anybody, community leaders, my father, cops per se, to get me to change my ways, to flip my switch, to go on another path. I was hell-bent being a gangster, and I ended up being that. I ended up being a crime boss. I ended up making it happen and making it work, right?
Hey, sorry.
Go ahead.
Somebody in the comments says, I am Shooter Shane says, does this guy have a book? I would read it. So the book is The Life and the Hard Times of Ricky Atkinson. The Life, Crimes, and Hard Times of Ricky Atkinson. You could get that at Chapters, Toronto Public Library. I got Lacey's.
Yeah, my book's been out 5 years. It's going to second printing, which means people are reading it. So it's a unique book in Canadian history. It's a black gangster book, man. And there's no other way to look at that. It talks about Black Panthers, it talks about the mob, and it talks about the downtown Toronto West End primarily. So
where did you become grievance clerk?
Okay, so while in prison, even before I got to prison, I educated myself. I took pride in knowing stuff. I didn't take pride in the degrees that came with it. I was one of the guys that sucked up knowledge. So I was reading encyclopedias when I was in training school for fun. So when I got into the Don Jill, I was doing the same thing. And that impressed a lot. There was a lot of guys, most criminals at the time were functionally illiterate. So that impressed them that this young 17-year-old Black Panther leader was really intellectual. He was really reading a lot, studying a lot, studied hard. So I studied all that stuff. So I studied all that stuff in jail and doctoring myself on a lot of stuff, but it also saved me too. It also saved me because it cushioned me from the normal angst of doing time. There's a beat in prison. There's a beat that happens in every prison, and every prison the beat's different. It doesn't matter what prison I was in, because I was one of those guys that would grab books, read, play chess, be quiet, and plan crime. Primarily to plan crime, right? So when I came out of prison, I wanted to learn as much as I could learn while I was there in that particular university by as many people as I could. And I did. But when I was paroled firstly in Montreal in 1975, I had zero intentions of committing a crime again. I thought Montreal and my boxing skills and the skills I brought to the table would be enough for me to succeed on parole, given the fact that parole is hard. And I had one of the first Black parole officers in history, Beverly Boyd. I mentioned her in my book. So when I got to Montreal and see who my parole officer was, I was like, wow, man, I got a Black parole officer, and I felt safer that way. She tried hard to pull me into the Black Community Center and the Black politics of Montreal at the time. And I refused because in my mind I still wanted to be gangster. Even though I didn't want to commit crime, I had the gangster attitude still. And I transitioned that gangster attitude into boxing, because boxing is that kind of attitude. You know, it's the same street mentality. You want to be the best, the baddest, the toughest, the best. You know, that
gotta win.
Yeah, you got to win at all
costs. As long as you showed up.
So that's what boxing does. So anyways, so what happened to me happens to most guys that are trying to flip their switch. They're trying to go straight and narrow. They're on parole. I had a car accident. And I said to the guy in the car accident, don't call the cops. You know, I don't want anything to do with cops. Whatever your car costs to pay, I'll pay.
I'm sure shame.
Yeah, so a couple of days later, he told me how much it was. I didn't have the money, and I was too prideful to go borrow a bank for it, right? So I shot back to Toronto and robbed a bank, man. That's what I do. Came back and I paid him off, and then I said to myself, what am I doing here? I might as well go. There's more action back there. There's more stuff. You know, there's more people. I know more. And I should flip my switch back. I actually said that myself. I should flip my switch back to criminology, employ what Warren Hart taught me, screw the man, screw parole, screw it all, and see how long I last before I get blown up, shot out. Yeah. Because we don't believe in that mentality. We'll live long. So when I went back to Toronto, I went back with the idea.
It's self-destructive, but it's ingrained. Like, and one PO, a Black PO has said, like, if a Black man has a good job, just don't big dog him. Like, he doesn't like to be big dog. You know what I'm saying? Like, put me down or discourage me or like.
Forget about the color of the parole officers, because there's more Black parole officers now than ever before. And they're only still 2% or 1% of the amount of, I think there's 11,000 parole officers. You might see 5 in the whole of Canada that are Black. 5, 10 tops. Yeah, so there's not a lot of.
And they're not
a white parole
seat too, because if you're a PO, you're not.
A South Asian parole officer told me when I first got out in BC on my last parole that I'm still on now, we don't want you to be successful. We don't want you to succeed, because if you do, it would be harder for us to monitor you. And how I took that is she's saying, I don't give a shit about you, your family, your kids, because that's wealth that's transferable to generation after generation. I don't want you to make any wealth for your kids. As long as you don't violate your parole, I'll be able to take my government check to cash it so that my kids can go to school. We don't give a shit about your kids. Another thing, the warden of Millhaven, Rene Gobet, I put it in my book so I could say his name now. He said to me, because he went to Nova Scotia because he's going to be the commissioner, the deputy commissioner of the East Coast. So he was going to go there. He came back and said to me, with your family alone, my family's guaranteed 100 years work in corrections. And I challenged him on that. And he came back later and he apologized. He said, I shouldn't have said that because you're right. We don't know what's going to happen with our kids. So so my son,
right?
so my son's a straight, narrow, works construction, and I think his got in trouble. If I can correct, I saw some information in the newspapers about his son being disciplined, fired from the Kingston police force. So yeah, you don't know
Yeah,
what's going to happen
right.
with our son, but
You
that's the
don't know,
point. So, but when
right?
correctional types tell me that for the rest of my life, I'm going to be giving them a job, that says
Yeah.
something. Is it because
Mhm.
I am never going to go straight and I'm always going to be crooked? Or are you going to make me crooked, whether I'm straight or not, so you can get
Yeah.
those checks? So you always wonder what
Pressure,
they're going
right?
to do.
Yeah.
So, I would say within corrections of Canada, 99% of them are straight shooters, do their job. Then you have the
Yeah.
1% that are crooked.
Yeah.
You have a lot of psychopathy within corrections, as you do in the military, as you do in nursing. Take that aside, because you still have to deal with those. A lot of psychopath inmates, a lot of psychopath staff within a correctional environment. It's just the way it is. But the thing is they've stopped helping people get out. What they want to do now, play the game, maintain the status quo. So we're not on the news, and you're getting out less treated now. So before, parole was actually a means of treatment for you. When parole now is so oppressive, at least from my vantage point, because everybody looks at it differently. Some of my white
And
friends.
look, it's a cultivation. It's like cultivate the freaking the criminals. It's
Yeah, it
just
is.
empower it.
So some of my white friends,
And when
I
we
say,
lock them away,
do you have this
they're
the
gonna
same
talk.
problems that I do? And they go, no. So I'll give you an example. I was on day parole in Frontenac Institution, which is a minimum farm camp adjacent to Collins Bay Prison in Kingston. And I could walk now or take the bus or ride a bicycle down to the cable station because I had a television show, first television show in the history of the world, run by a prisoner in prison. And as I was walking down the street once, a car pulled up. In the car was a light-skinned black guy who was killed a cop. He was on parole, and two other lifers. One who escaped to the Collins Bay, robbed a Brinks truck, and got caught. And now he was out again on parole. They were going to work, and they asked me to get in their car. They said, hey, jump in, man. We're all going to get a hamburger. You want to come? And I said, I can't come. And they go, why not? I just mentioned three lifers, one cop killer in a car.
Yeah.
And I said, because the warden, guy named, the deputy warden, his name was Emery at the time, he gave me a map. And on the map was a red line. And he threatened me and said if I was ever off that red line, that I was going back behind the wall and I'd never get out again. So imagine how I felt when staring in the car with three lifers who appeared to be freer than me as I was walking down the street. That's the essence of parole. Parole is really hard to navigate because your ego gets in the way. If you're, go ahead.
Who was facing deportation, and you know how Millhaven gets. If you could give us a little history on Millhaven's injustices and games to be played like that way. But there's a gentleman who was in Millhaven. They're in SIU. He's trying to put him elsewhere. They're just dealing with going to be deported back to Somalia. He's in a wheelchair right now. That's him right here. Let's see how it says "We Too Federal" on the screen.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, so
any share any insight?
So I don't know his case. I know that he's fighting deportation to a country that has a lot of problems, and he could justify his want to stay as a refugee in Canada. Any sentence you get above 6 months, you're eligible for deportation out of this country due to that singular criminal offense. So I don't know his entire case, but what I know then is there's lots of people who have been deported back to countries where they didn't make it. And we have a law in Canada not to deport someone to a country where they're facing a death penalty sentence. We have actually a law that says that, so we don't send people back. But there have been people that different African countries, different South American countries. Even in Jamaica, there's some guys that were sent back. As soon as the plane landed, the army picked them up, and they were finished, man. They got taken out. So they could have had a good refugee claim saying, if I go back to Jamaica, the army's going to kill me. But that's hard to prove that stuff, right? So the thing is from a Somalian point of view, and Somalians
I think they were sending him back to Ethiopia. That's the ambassador, like the ambassador. So they
is he Ethiopian?
So they didn't answer. So within that time, there's a certain time frame. So within that time, like they created injustice use of force, and he's in a wheelchair right now. So end of the story is like at this point where he's sitting right now, like that he was supposed to be done, like you're implemented on parole conditions, you know?
Yeah, there's a time constraint for all this stuff when you're dealing with immigration, and also when you're dealing with paroles and federal law and applications. There's time constraints everywhere. So if you pass time constraints, you usually lose jurisdictions, and some favor then falls upon you. If that's the case, unless the government settles down and appeals whatever decision was going to free you or give you more freedoms. And in this particular case, the Harper government made an agreement with immigration to tweak the immigration act so that it's not in favor of prisoners until your sentence expires, and then it changed. In this particular guy's case, his sentence isn't going to expire. And if you're a lifer, obviously your sentence will never expire, right? However, if you're in Canada, you're from another country, and you've killed someone in Canada, i.e. a Canadian citizen or other, when you make full parole, and I know lots of guys that have, then you go to the country where you're from. And I'll use one case where a guy I know really well. I talk to him on Facebook all the time. He's in Fiji.
Yeah.
That's paradise to us. So he's a Christian guy, and he's down there going inside prisons to do that prison administration stuff, which was big stuff. But I told him when he was leaving, I said to him, hey, pal, you're leaving in a couple of days? He goes, yeah, man. I said, you will be freer than I could ever dream of. And you're in a double tap, a double murder, because you won't be restricted by Canadian politics. You'll be free of Canadian politics and all that entails. And that'll be stuck to me forever. And he understood what I was saying. So I would hope that some country would elect to take me so that I can get deported, so that I could be as free as him. But I'm unfortunately, I'm a Canadian citizen. So getting back to this legalities of Canadian prison. It's recent new in history. So in 1981 or 82, the Charter of Rights came in. They're called the Freedom of Charter of Rights, our charter. And because of that Charter of Rights, we appealed to the government for a grievance system. They were amicable to it because guys were killing guards at the time because they had no voice. Yeah. And they created a grievance system to give the guys a voice, i.e. through institutional court and then to federal court if you so wanted to go there. Most guys can't afford to go to federal court. So the grievance system was their only out. I was one of the first grievance clerks, and I fought tooth and nail for these guys to get some kind of remedies. I'm also the only guy, I'll point that out, because I always wanted to be a lawyer when I was younger. I put that in my book. I'm the only guy that I think in Canadian history that ever represented two people in institutional court in Millhaven, the toughest, I wouldn't say the most illegal institution, but they know how to twist and bend the rules there differently than anywhere else.
Sometimes the panic buttons don't work.
So one of my cousin was charged, and one of the members of the Dirty Tricks gang, he was charged, and this other guy was charged. The other guy was charged for attempt to riot, which can carry a life sentence. So I fought his charge, and I won, and I lost my cousin's charge. His charge was he called the warden every name he could think of before the warden said, take him to the hole. So I lost his case. He brings that up. You beat the other, you won for the other guy, but you lost for me. And that's how it is. So I was a grievance clerk. I was law clerk, because after that we petitioned. A lot of us were working on appeals because of the grievance systems. They led to other stuff. We couldn't fully deal with guys' appeals because we didn't have access to the books. So they gave every institution a law office and access to law books. And that takes the burden off of criminal lawyers and the justice system per se, because guys then work on their own cases, and sometimes it takes 10 years, 15 years to work on a case. You know what I mean?
And
so it saves a lot of money.
You're making minimum wage you're making lower than minimum wage at Corcan, so
okay, so
you pay for your lawyer, right?
Every job when I first went to prison, every job was 10 cents an hour. The inmate committee got an incentive, as kitchen workers did, because they worked 7 days a week. So you got 10 cents an hour, 20 cents went back to the inmate welfare fund to offset all the cost of what it is to run a prison from the inmate's point of view. So you make 60 cents a day. However, with that 60 cents a day, then you could live, because the administration gave you a lot of your medicinal stuff. There's a lot of stuff you didn't have to pay for. In 1987, I was on the committee in Millhaven when the government proposed a change in our financial system and our pay scales, and implemented a 5 part pay scale where you go from grade 1 to grade 5. When you get to grade 5, you reach the maximum pay scale, which was $5.75 a day then.
Okay.
So that was in
what was the year?
1987.
Yeah.
So in 1987, I worked hard with other committee members to make this thing happen. It didn't happen. And right away, we regretted it because now we had to pay for all our medicals, or 90% of our medical stuff. A bottle of shampoo being $2 then, being $6 now. So that's a whole day's pay to buy one bottle of shampoo, when before you could have got shampoo off them for free, toothpaste, tooth powder for free, lanolin, skin creams, that kind of stuff for free. Cocoa butter and all that kind of stuff for black skincare products came from us arguing, fighting, and sometimes going to the hole, and sometimes going off and getting tear gassed and roughed up on our ways to the hole, fighting for these basic rights. So they had skincare products for different racial groups, the black prisoners being the primary group that fought the hardest. So they had cocoa butter and different lanolin and different hair cream and different that black magic to shave with, because you didn't get the razor bumps and all that stuff there. So those are the kind of things we did for the population at the time. I'd say my biggest, the one grievance that gives me the most pleasure is because I used some historical case. The African guy come to me and said that his parole officer, he asked for a transfer, and she said, all you Africans come to this country and all you do is want, want, want. That's a racist for sure. So I said to him, I'll write your grievance up if you have the balls to sign it, because they can ship you out after I write this grievance. And if you tell that I wrote this grievance, they will probably ship me out, but I'll do it for you. So I wrote the grievance, and there was a guy in Bath named Jupiter who was a slave, and there was a house named the Russell Plantation. We at Bath Institution would sometime go to the Russell House and cut their grass and fix their fence or whatever that kind of minor work you had to do. And I'd always sing those old slave songs when I was there, because that was an old slave plantation in the town of Bath. So they used to beat Jupiter when he was uppity, I guess. And they had a whipping pole called Jupiter's whipping pole. So long after slavery, white folks in that neighborhood would say, behave yourself or I'll take you to Jupiter's whipping pole. So when I wrote this guy's grievance, I said that I'm not Jupiter and I won't take this political whipping laying down. And of course they lost their mind, the administration. But he didn't rat me out. He didn't rat me out. So the concession was, if you withdraw this grievance, because it was powerful, we will send you to the institution you want to go to, which was Beaver Creek. And that's where he ended up. So that was a good one. The next case for me is a case that changed Canadian history. There was a guy who eventually became my co-accused, wasn't my co-accused at the time, killed one of my cousins. He, in turn, he's related to me, but not so directly, a Nova Scotian guy. So he petitioned for clemency to the justice minister, which was Ellen Rock at the time. I was doing an interview with Ellen Rock because of the television show that I had in prison. And Ellen Rock said that his greatest concern were the people applying for clemency, because he was their last hope. And he had hundreds, literally hundreds of cases on his desk. And I pulled out Roddy Kane's application for clemency. And I said, I wouldn't give you this unless I believed in it. I know all the principles of the case. I know everything. It's cousins against cousins. And I'm stuck in the middle on both sides. But what I know to be fact is Roddy didn't do what he was convicted of doing. Roddy Kane's a black man. He became the second guy in Canadian history to have his murder charge withdrawn by the justice minister. That's big, powerful stuff. So you can't say at the top of the justice game it's racist, or Roddy Kane would have never made it. I say that all the time. The racism comes in small towns, small communities, or in pieces and portions of Toronto by racist individuals that are here. It's not as prevalent as you would say. The whole system's racist. It can't be, or Roddy would have never got out. I'll give you another case. All the cases I give you are Googleable. So there was a guy in Oshawa who killed his wife and his mother-in-law, and he drove from Toronto in he used a sleepwalking defense. He was like 6'7", tall, skinny black guy. And he won in an all-white jury in Oshawa. Struck his sentence down. He won. He won the sleepwalking defense. The first guy in Canada to win a sleepwalking defense happens to be a black guy, 6'7", skinny little Reiki guy, and he wins it. So you have to say the people of Oshawa or that jury at the time wasn't racist, or he would have never got out, because that's such an unusual defense. Yeah, I drove from Toronto to Oshawa, and then I killed somebody, but I didn't know I did it because of sleepwalking. He had a history of it, and he had all these medical practitioners that had treated him and said, yeah, that's his condition. So it's weird when you look at Canadian jurisprudence and racist ideology or affecting you. Are there racist parole officers? Of course, because they're Canadians. Not all of them. Not all Canadians are racist. That's a fact. Where you go in Canada, you will meet racism. So I come from an area where I heard we don't give no black gas to my father, and I remember my father saying that I got no gas. If you don't give me any gas, then I'm going to have to park on the side of the road. And the guy said, I don't care where you park your black ass, but it ain't here. And my father drove on the side of the road and a trucker stopped. And he goes, you need any help? He goes, yeah, he won't serve me any gas. And he gave my father a little container of gas. I remember that. I remember going to a restaurant. My mother brought it up the other day, but I remember it. There was a restaurant on Spadina called Stevens. And my mother went to go in there with my father, and he stopped him. He didn't like a black person with a black woman. He didn't mind. Of course, white people didn't bother him, but half-breeds or people that were multiracial somehow bothered this guy. My mother also tells me about going to a Chinese restaurant in Chinatown. This would have been in the late 50s, early 60s, and they wouldn't serve my father and my mother. My father, a big, tough guy, got rowdy, so the cops came. So the cops ordered the Chinese restaurants to serve my people, my mother and my father, and the Chinese restaurant said, can we move two tables together? She sit at one, you sit at the other, you're still sitting together, but officially we never let a mixed race couple in our restaurant together. That was my era. That's the era that after the 1968 immigration change changed, because you didn't see or hear that anymore. It changed. There was a great influx of black people from all over the world, different cultures, different people coming, and it mitigated that racist ideology from some Canadians at the time. Are there racist parole officers? Of course. Are there racist cops? Of course. Are there racist people in the military? Of course. Are there racist doctors? Of course. I give you a racist doctor example. I was in Beaver Creek. I broke my leg playing soccer. Guy ran and kicked me in the leg. I was the goalie, and I didn't have shin pads on to protect myself. Broke my leg. I'm in the hospital, and they had a South Asian guy there. In those days, South Asian guys wouldn't have made it in the prison population. Even black Canadians were conditioned not to like them. They eat rats. They live with cockroaches. All these kind of stereotypes. So he was working in the hospital. He had a degree. He was a real smart guy. Anyways, when I was in the hospital, he said he overheard the doctor talking, using the N-word. That's what paid him. And he said, the doctor's going to put a cast on me that's going to cripple me. And he said, this is the way to mitigate that, because I had my leg was broken in 2 spots, and he was going to put a cast on below my leg, my knee, which meant the weight of the cast would eventually cause my leg to malfunction. Anyway, so I pulled the cast up, tied the cast around, so I did what he told me to do, and my leg came out okay. I was never as fast as I was before that, but fast enough. But that was a racist doctor trying to hurt me through his racism at the time. So I remember that. Yeah, so he was from the Belleville, Trenton area, which was used to have used to have a KKK clavering there. So take it for what it was.
I sensed that. I just sensed that. I was like, there has to be a club like that.
Yeah, so they did.
Good Lord.
So that was that area of town. But so the thing is I've had some really good parole officers. I mentioned them in my book. I've mentioned the bad ones and the good ones. Personally, I don't give a shit. You are who you are. And if you could mention me in your reports, then I should be able to mention you in my reports and what you say. So some of them would say that I have this anti-government attitude, that I hate the administration. And I say in opposite, you have an anti-inmate problem. You hate inmates. And I don't think you should be working at this job, because you can't hate and successfully do your job. Just like me, with all that hate that was in me, I couldn't successfully be paroled. I had too much hate in me, but I was good at masking it, playing the game, i.e. play the game. So that's the thing. So what I say, there's more, and we predicted this. I think I told the commissioner a bunch of years, he was walking through, I said, you're going to have a black problem in a few years from now. And he said, I hope not.
Yeah.
That was, he said, I hope not, Rick. I hope that you're wrong. I wasn't wrong. We do have a problem because they did sweeps. And I knew that was happening. They did Jane and Finch sweeps. They did South Etobicoke sweeps. They did Scarborough sweeps of different communities. And anytime you do a sweep, you sweep up a bunch of people that are innocent. Those innocent people are mad. It makes the community mad. What happened to your son? He got swept up. And you can't say, well, he shouldn't have been there. Everybody knows that he got swept up and that he's not a bad guy. And now when he comes out of jail, he's a bad guy. And now he's a different guy when he comes out of jail. So that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's weird. So they brought L. Ford, who became the highest ranking police officer during my time, into our community to start what was called he became a race relation officer. And right away I said to myself, this ain't working. Something's not right here. And within, I'd say 6 months, our whole group we were all charged with minor charges. And I think
he was just gathering info.
Yeah, I think it was the police's intent was just to get as many people on the books as they could, so they could watch you and monitor you. And maybe
they did that to my neighborhood.
Yeah, so maybe I'm a little positive or optimistic here. Maybe they did it so they think they could help you rather than see you go in this direction. I say maybe, but I'm probably wrong in that, because if they really wanted to help you, they'd have spent other money in other directions to do that. In other words, more community help, more community programs, more sporting programs, psychological help, job opportunities, and all that stuff, if they really wanted to help you, right?
Right. So now we hear people would just prefer to get to their stack, get out, and lean on their culture, but we're forced to sit in the halfway houses and
the halfway
deal with them.
Houses are weird. So I'm going to tell you
what's
something.
What's going to work best for us?
What works best is a black halfway house. So they had a black halfway house in 1979 called the Josiah Henson House, and I think 8 of us were there. 4 of them were my relatives. And the person that ran the house petitioned the government for the next year's money, $100,000. He took the money and then he took off and gave that money to Rosie Douglas's Communist Party fund, which really pissed off the Canadian government big time. However, I hear them rumbling now. I hear black parole officers talking about, we are trying to get another black halfway house. And I heard one say, we're going to try to start a Gladue. The Gladue is the native, do you understand what Gladue is?
Yeah.
Well, I'll explain it so that those that don't know. So what happened is
for those that don't know.
An Indigenous guy in Northern Ontario was arrested for breaking into a cottage. The judge gave him a white circuit judge, which means a traveling judge, gave him 5 years. The community went crazy. He didn't deserve that, and they created a Gladue court. And inside the court, they had community elders, police, et cetera, all these people involved in what's called restorative justice, and they resentenced him to 2 weeks on an island by himself to reflect, and then lots of counseling after that. And that became a model in the Indigenous community for people coming out of jail to use Gladue as a court system. So black people need a black court system. I don't know what you're going to call it, Gladue rather than Gladue. I don't know what you're going to call it. But it's the same thing, so that when you go in court, however, it's a community thing, because I've been in court with black judges who were just as venomous and vicious as any white judge I've ever been in front of, right? So the thing, it takes a whole community, I guess, to make this thing work from restorative. But I think that's the most needed thing in corrections in Canada. I have 50 years experience. I go back 150 to 200 years experience through my family. I know what works. It works because it's a game changer. And how it changes the game is, there's a guy who's getting in trouble in, we'll say, Quebec. And there's a halfway house. We'll say that halfway house is in Manitoba. It's a black halfway house. He will change his ways, put in a request to be transferred to that black halfway house. And while that request is pending and all the mechanisms that have to happen to make that transfer, he's going to behave himself because he doesn't want to blow that chance. In the absence of that, what do you give him? You give him the halfway houses you got now, which are Kill Street, the different CCC houses and halfway houses that you have in the Hamilton region or in Quebec or in the other provinces. And the whole thing is, you don't fit in nice. So it's weird being in a house. It's harder to do time outside of the institution. The illusion of freedom is there, but it's an illusion. And when you're well aware of the illusion, then it can. So anyways, I suffered a lot in terms of being on parole, trying to navigate, deal with, trying to play the game. I was
Mm.
sometimes I would say even victimized by some of my parole officers by asking me to jump hurdles that were impossible to jump, to
Mhm.
behave in a way that they themselves wouldn't behave, even if they
Yeah.
were in my shoes. But they have the ultimate power and control. So the thing is when you're in prison, your parole officer comes by and says hi, you could literally tell him to go fuck himself. And there's not much he
Yeah.
can do except just take it and look at you like, what? What did you say? Oh my God. And then
Yeah.
because you
I don't
have
want to
nothing to
talk to you
lose, you might
today.
not care. But you do that here, you're going to be back in jail, even though you feel the same way.
Yeah.
So lots of guys from my colleagues, my school, you hear them saying, I wish I was back in the jail, in the hole, so I can clear my head. And that's a
Yeah.
real strange thing to say, that you'd
I
rather
know.
be
I
in
know.
solitary confinement, alone, tortured, so that you can come out better for society. That's a
Yeah.
weird thing to say because the
Mhm.
people that are supposed to help you aren't helping you, and your only
Yeah.
alternative is reincarceration, more pain, and then more freedom afterwards. It's a weird
Yeah.
concept, and that
Yeah.
comes up a lot. So there's times I
Mhm.
said to myself, I should go back, I should finish my time, and just be free when I get out. Because while I'm in jail, I don't have to dance any hurdles. I don't have to pretend not to be me. One on parole,
Yeah.
I got a 19-year-old white girl who still lives at home with her mother, and she has all this power because she took a 6-month course or a 6 weeks course to be a parole officer, and she has a bachelor's degree in, let's say, economics. And now she's
Yeah.
a psychologist, a penologist, an
Yeah.
expert psychologist, penologist. She's only been on the job for 2 months. And she's telling
Mhm.
someone 3 times her age that's been around the corner a long time how to jump these hurdles. Not for my benefit, but for her benefit and her check, as I
Yeah.
don't step
Yeah.
on her check and embarrass her in any way, so that maybe she may have screwed up, maybe, and I did something stupid, now she's getting fired. So the whole thing is to
Yeah. Yeah.
prevent that from happening. Cover your ass, watch your ass. You hear them say it all the time.
Yeah.
However, I've had parole officers even more recently that weren't like that, who went to bat for me, who pushed for my freedoms, my greater
Mhm.
freedoms, I would call it, because
Yeah.
they were justified in their
Yeah.
eyes. So
Yeah.
and that's what we live in. We live in that oxymoron of the yin and the yang, the good and the bad cop, the good cop, the bad parole officer, the good parole officer. And you have to navigate it. Keep in mind, in Canada, you're sentenced to 10 years. You will serve every day of that 10 years, no matter who you are, to the
Yeah.
second that it happened. There is no
Mhm.
reprieve. You'll either do it on
No.
parole or you'll do it in prison. But you'll do it,
Mhm.
no matter how
Yeah.
good you are. So it should be,
Mhm.
in other words, they should let you breathe after a while. So I've been out 10 years now, and they're still not letting me breathe. I still feel that knee on my neck, man. And I'm saying,
You're too
when is it?
sharp. You're
Yeah.
too
And
sharp.
I go sometimes, and I say it to them because I'm not voice first. I shoot from the hip, man. And I
Mhm.
say, when's the punishment going to stop, and the
Mhm.
rehabilitation's going to start? And they look at me, you're on friggin' parole. You don't have many conditions. What are you talking about? And it's over their head. They don't get it. I know they don't get it. I know they don't understand what I'm talking about when I say that.
Yeah.
And I understand why they're getting mad, because they're saying we're doing
Mhm.
everything we can, but they're not doing everything they can. They're doing everything they can to
No.
make sure they maintain their job. However, again, I'll
Yeah.
reiterate, some of them go beyond and above and beyond that, and they do stuff for you beyond that job. I'll give you an
Yeah.
example. I was in Vancouver trying to come back to Toronto. Toronto didn't want me. They didn't want me in Vancouver, but they accepted me because my wife's kid was having a kid, and she moved out there. So I
Mhm.
had that ace to move out there. Then
Yeah.
I tried to come back because I couldn't deal with the parole officers there. They were strangling me, and
Mhm.
I came back here. So I jumped from the fire to the frying pan. While I was back here, I ran into some real bad, hard parole officer. I asked one
Mhm.
parole officer to mentor this 19-year-old kid, and they give me all kind of, they just lost their mind, threatened to put me back in jail if I even talked to him again. And he was murdered 2 weeks later. And he looked at me as a sanctuary. He said, man, I want to get out of this. I know you know how to get me out of this. In other words, he wanted to be free and to live. And my advice to him
Yeah.
would have been, had I mentored him, is listen, it doesn't cost a lot of money to leave town. It only costs you $50 to get to Barrie. And then once you're in
Yeah.
Barrie, it's the Salvation Army hostel. If you don't know anybody, it's better than packing a pistol and grinding it out, shooting it out. He died 2 weeks later.
Mhm.
Someone killed him. So And
Rest in peace.
that's the thing. So they prevented me from helping that guy. That's why I'm doing this show, because of my respect for Richard Mills and the Keep Six organization. He was told not to help cons. He was told not to help inmates. He was told to shut up and do his time, to finish his sentence. And he said, no, my sentence will be over soon enough. I'm going to help inmates. I'm going to help my brothers and sisters. I'm going to do what I can. I'm going to fill in where you're inadequate. And now his sentence is over, and he is helping people.
You walked on the other side of the wall. Is it, as an organization?
Exactly. So the reason I'm doing this show is because of my respect for him and his tenacity and pushing into the government to fill those needed niche areas. Here's the thing. Someone asked me to go inside prison and talk to the guys inside, to mentor them, to set up programs. And I've spent my whole life doing that. I've set up programs. I've started the BIFA group. I started in 1974, and it's still going. It's the oldest running program in Canadian corrections right now, even though no one will say that. No one will give me that pat on the back. But I did. So the thing is I'm good at that. So someone offered me, I won't say the organization, an opportunity to go inside and talk to the guys, put my life at risk for $20 an hour. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you really kidding me? You spend millions and millions of dollars. It's in the billions of dollars dealing with people in corrections. And then you're going to take someone with 50 years knowledge and starting and setting up programs. 50 years I've been doing it. And you're going to say, here's $20 an hour to come and risk your life. I would say, pay me what you're getting paid, and I'll do it. Because your degree is no better than my degree. So what makes you so much more privileged? And therein lies the argument. So until they start using, I would say, this resource, the resource of guys like Richard Mills, myself, and other guys myself, and paying them accordingly, they're always going to be behind the eight ball. There'll always be a deficit. I'll give you an example. My cousin Ibram Downey, for 27 years, was going inside these provincial institutions, mentoring guys because he's an imam on Islamic teachings. And now he's so he was doing that for 27 years. And then he did it for all those years because of the amount of relatives that he had in prison. And he saw that if he could turn them to Islam, he could flip their switch and change their ways. And he did for a lot of them. So guys like him, what did he get for it? Did he get paid? No, he didn't get paid any money for it. And that's what I'm talking about.
So he wasn't seeking none of that.
He just wanted to
access to the energy.
He just wanted to help.
The energy you keep in the riches, true riches.
So we have a system right now that 12% of Canadians are black, and when they make up 25% of the prison population in Ontario. So obviously there's more black people and Indigenous people in prison than ever before. That's because of the sweeps after the crack epidemic. Crack scared them. Not that crack scared them, but the movies that came out of the United States because of the crack scared them more. New Jack City, and all this bullshit. That's what scared them. They're watching these movies and they think that's what's going to happen up here. So they reacted to it. And now we have this problem. We have more people of color behind bars than ever before. Often a lot of them on gangster sentences or associated sentences, I call them. You're hanging with someone who's a criminal, but that guy might be your cousin and you're not doing anything criminal. You just happen to be on the block. And they swoop you up. You have the same last name. You're charged with gangsterism, and now you're doing 12 years, 8 years, 7 years. And the crime that they got you on would have netted only 6 months. We'll say a couple of joints. Well, with the gangsterism charge, the 6 months turned to penitentiary time. And there's where a lot of anger in the black community and the Indigenous community comes from. Because there's a lot of those guys coming back out of prison because they don't have the programs, they haven't spent the money, and especially in ethno-cultural stuff, and those guys are coming out untreated and worse off than when they went in. So this guy that got caught with a few joints, got hit with the gangster stuff that he didn't do, is now a real gangster in the community because that's what the prison made him out to be. So are monsters created in the prison? Yes. Is Canadian Correction Service of Canada good at treating and correcting individuals? Yes, they are. We have a low recidivism rate when you look at the big picture. When you look at murderers, for example, so few of them come back to prison. Once they're paroled, then we could say that Canada is really successful. Canada is really successful at treating people that have committed violent offenses, i.e. murders, and they got a long time. Less effective in treating people with drug problems because they don't have drug addiction. They're not spending the money in that area. So what it takes for a person to stay out of prison is A, psychological treatment, B, drug interdiction treatment, and C, the opportunity for work. If you treat those three things in a person, it's less likely he would come back, saving the Canadian government millions and millions of more dollars in. But there's a game that's played by the police, there's a game that's played by the courts, there's a game that's played by politicians, and it's to use crime as a method of building power and control and making money for your political party. And because that game exists, those three things that mitigate crime will never be implemented to its fullest height that will really have the impact we're looking for, as been done in other countries, i.e. Northern European countries, Denmark, Sweden, primarily. They're closing prisons down in their country because they've started a methodology of dealing with prisoners.
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah, so they're literally shutting prisons down. So I'd like to see that here. There's a double talk. I could hear myself for some reason. Okay, not now. So anyways, what I'd like to hear is a parole officer to say, I'm such a good parole officer that in 10 years from now, they're going to fire me because there's going to be none of you guys around to treat. And that would, to me, would be a good parole officer, but that's not going to happen because there's too much money in playing the game. But they can go in that direction and make it happen. They can shut all this down if they stop Americanizing our Canadian prison system. And if they, instead of Americanizing our prison system, why don't you Europeanize our prison system, which is a better model, a better model. So why take this American racist and negative model and use it as our test model to run our prison system when there's another model in the world that's far better than the American system? And we try hard, we as a prison population, we, the Black Canadians, Black Americans, Black West Indians that are in the Black Africans that are within our Canadian prison system, we tried hard not to allow those white racist Americans to Americanize
Hey, Rick,
our prison
can you hear
system.
me?
I hear you well. Yep. And could you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. Yep.
There we go.
Yeah. Yeah, so, you know, who am I? Who am I? Someone that's been 50 years in the system, who's been in the system for 50 years, and who's been affected by the system for over 200 years. Who am I? You know? So someone's trying to call me, I'll click them out.
Yeah, my AirPods died. It's going to give like a double thing, so I'm going to keep muted. You can keep going.
Yeah, I heard that. So, okay, as long as it doesn't bother you, it doesn't bother me. So go ahead, question. We've got dead air.
Right. Yeah. Okay, we got a question also on that, to touch on the deportation in that situation there. Brother, you have a question?
Yeah. How you doing, brother?
Not bad, my brother, just hanging.
So my question is, how long has been Millhaven Institution been opened?
1971 it opented. In 1971, they had Canada's biggest riot in Kingston. It was the most bloodiest riot. So they built 5 prisons across Canada, and they used a prison construction model from a California prison. So you had small gyms and big yards, because it's sunny in sunny California. So what happened is the first winter, there's these small gyms compressed everybody inside of it. But the problem was the inmates that they took from the riot, they put Millhaven. They also took the guards that were taken hostage in the riot and put in Millhaven. Payback being a bitch. So Millhaven was a dangerous place to be in. I'll give you an example. I'll even say his name. So I got Stringer and Springer mixed up in my head right now. Both of them worked at Millhaven, but one of them hit me in the head with the billy when I first came into Millhaven over something my uncle did. He came up, he said, "Are you Atkinson?" Yeah, whap, hit me with the billy down in the whole section over something my uncle did. I don't know what it is that my uncle did. And then years later, when I was doing my television show, I had the camera on, and he didn't know, and we were talking, and he brought it up. He said, "Remember the time that when you first came to Haven, I was 17 years old, I hit you in the head with the billy. I had to jump up in the air, you were so tall." So he was laughing and joking about the abuse that I suffered at the time. So in 1983, it was in the newspapers. A guy was killed in Millhaven, 83, 84. I was in the Haven in 84, but I wasn't there for that particular murder. And the guards went into a guy's cell in Millhaven and they stabbed him to death. They took the knife, they put it in another guy's cell. That guy was subsequently charged with the murder. In court, the judge ruled that it was impossible for him to commit the murder. The only people that could have committed the murder were the staff on that night. They called that group the Millhaven Mob. They said in the newspaper, the Millhaven Mob murders again. No, not the inmates, but the guards. I'll take that further 25 years later in KP, a guy named Kenny Murdoch, who was an informant, a mob hitman that turned informant. He set up 17 guards were arrested for a variety of crimes. And out of the 17 guards that were arrested, 4 killed themselves. 2 hung themselves, for sure 3, 4 hung, and then 1 shot himself in Bath while I was there in front of us. He took the gun out, he was sitting in his truck on the other side of the fence, he shot himself in the head. So 17 guards arrested, 3 or 4 of them dead, so they wouldn't have to go to court. And that's corruption within the Correctional Service of Canada. So I would say that corruption, it's not that prevalent. Most of the guards aren't involved in criminal activity, but there is a rogue element, and just like a gang, they became a gang of thieves, a gang of murderers because they had murdered inmates. So yeah, so it's a strange place to be in.
It's a strange place.
Yeah, it's a strange.
We have a new gang called the Barn Boys.
It's a strange place to hang your hat. That's for sure.
It used to be the fucking mob gang. Now it's the Barn Boys.
Yeah.
In 2023.
Yeah. So you know, and that kind of stuff there is weird. So there's a reaction. There's always a reaction, action for everything that happens in the United States. If you're in a big gang and the guards do something to you, they get whacked for that because the gang takes care of shit. And I hate to see that shit happen up here, but I know that's a possibility of that. They got to pull it together. So anyways, the guards beat up my brother in the East Detention Center, and we went and blew up. When I saw him in Old City Hall, we just blew up. I asked the judge to take him to the hospital. He said no. He'll leave that decision up to the task force, the same guys that beat him up. So we blew up. That's the only time in Canadian history that a courtroom was shut down because of the ruckus from the inmates inside that courtroom. And we shut Old City Hall down. They had helicopters on the roof, blocked all the streets, sharpshooters there waiting for us to bust out of there. And that's the reaction to my brother getting beat up. So if I was going to do that then, I have a different mentality now. Imagine now with the amount of guns on the street, the amount of weaponry, the amount of technology. If guys want to really go off, payback's a bitch. The guards cops generally got to stop acting like a gang. They have a gangman. They got to stop that shit. We are a gang. My gang's bigger than your gang. I remember a guy said that to me, and I said, my gang operates on a 24/7 basis because that's what we do. You are a cop only 8 to 12 hours a day because that's what you do. And when you're not a cop, you're not gangbanging anymore. We gangbang 24/7. So if I run into your stupid friggin' ass, I'm going to eat you for breakfast right in front of your family because I'm still in gangbang mode.
Come on, baby.
You're not. So pull it together. You're not a gang. Just do your job. So here it is. I got relatives that are cops, and I got relatives that are prison guards. And when I was in jail, I was looking at my relatives, prison guards, and I would just say to them, just do your job, man. That's it. That's all we want of you. That's all we want from you. I don't need anything from you except you to do your job, along with all the other people that are around you to do their jobs. And that's basically what it is. So, anyways.
Brother, I respect everything you said. They actually think they're a gang, and when when they act like gang, we act more gang, and guess
Exactly.
what? Negative
Action, reaction, man. We settle down too. That's the craziness about it. But the whole thing is not all of them act that way. And that's the difference. If they all acted that way, we'd have more riots like KP, Attica, that kind of stuff. So, anyways, yeah, every everything in prison, all the angst that we deal with, because I've been in dangerous situations in prison in Millhaven and other maximum security prisons, and and what the prison administration tries to do is try to get you to do your time as peaceful and as productive as you could, and there's all these monkey wrenches that come in. Sometimes these gang guards throw a monkey wrench in, and other times inmates or gangs of inmates will throw a monkey wrench into that, and everybody else then suffers. All the other inmates, their families, they suffer. The guards suffer less because they get more pay, danger pay when someone goes off. So, in most institutions at Christmas or around Christmas, there's always a problem. And the guards get extra pay, danger pay, Christmas bonuses because of it. So what we do, the older of us, elders type, is we always try to keep tension down at that time. Don't go off, because if you guys go off, they're going to make more money. So we can do this thing better, more peaceful, and at the same time enjoy the fact that they're not going to make more money off our misery over this holiday period.
Good lack of knowledge of us being inmates that do max time, that get in a lot of problems, a lot of stabbings, a lot of fucking inhumane treatments.
Yeah, it's easy to get us
to
to
lack of knowledge.
Exactly. 100% it's lack of knowledge, brother.
Lack of knowledge.
Once you have the knowledge on all the games that they're playing. So anyways, a guy come running to me once, and I'm in Millhaven, I was chairman of the committee, he says, 2C range, we're going to go off, we're going to riot, we're going to do this. And I said, who's calling the shots around here? You guys voted me in that position, so I can give
I'm
my
gonna bring you
opinion.
something, OG. I'm gonna bring you something that's called Offenders Activity Report.
Yeah, I know.
Few guys get it in Canada. They have to monitor you on every move you make. I'm one of the guys in Canada. So I'm the only guy that actually have something on the staff, right? And they have to write down everything. I'm gonna bring you something in 30 seconds. I'll be back for you.
Okay, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Continue, Rich.
Yeah, I don't know what he's going to show me. He's going to show me a report of some kind. But anyways, there's all kind of report. One warden wrote a report that negated one of my cousins from going to camp, and then she falsified a CO's report and signed her name to that report. And some other CO alerted my cousin, and then my cousin called the lawyers. And the warden was crying, I didn't do anything wrong. Well, yeah, you falsified a report and signed your name to it, which carries a 5-year sentence here in Canada, by the way. I think it's in the criminal code, it's 0022. I think that's the section of it, where if a guard falsifies a report or negates to make a report in a specific time, usually 30 days of those our reports are in. So before you could criminally charge a guard if they went, or a staff member if they went past a 30-day time constraint. They struck that down, but they still have it. If they falsify a report, they can get 5 years. How many times have you seen falsified reports or reports that were different, plagiarized, copied from somewhere else, that kind of stuff? So, yeah. Anyways, I don't know where to go after this. Here's the good thing about guys in jail. We try hard, if you have families and visits, to make those family visit times the best times. And the rest of the prison population tends to fall in suit, and that's the most peaceful times, is a few days before a social event. Because no one's causing trouble, they want the social event to happen. And that was my thing. 2 of my kids were born while I was in Millhaven. And the other one was born when I was out on a parole. So my thing was to give the best, and don't forget I'm doing like 25, 30, 50 years, is to give my kids the best I could give them when they see me, at the times they see me. And I was able to do a lot of stuff with Kids' Day socials, Valentine's Day socials, multicultural socials, adding these more socials so that we can bring our families in and do that. But keep in mind, here's the other thing. I got regular visits throughout the entire 50 years that I've been doing. I haven't been without visits for long. There are times when I didn't have visits, because the women that I was with couldn't take it anymore, and they hit the road. And within a short order, like someone else come to take their place, and off, and I keep continuing. But the women, I go to a women's prison, the visiting room was empty, and one of my cousins said, when you guys are in prisons, we make sure your kids come up, we make sure that people are communicating with you. When us girls are in prison, especially sisters, indigenous and black, they don't get any help whatsoever. We just turn our backs on our sisters almost instantly upon arrest. We don't even want to take their phone calls from the bucket.
That's bad. That's very
and it's
bad.
opposite for them, because they go to jail for us. They carry our shit. You know, they carry our guns, and they're doing stuff for us, and they're going to jail for us, and we don't look after it. It's sad when I see that. It's the true deficit of our prison system is to make more for the girls. Keep in mind that they only had one federal prison in the whole of Canada until my television show portrayed the task force in P4W assaulting the female inmates. And then they had the Ann Arbor Commission and built prisons for women across the country. But prior to that, there was only KP for them. So we had it better than them. So the male relatives of mine suffer less than the female relatives of mine doing time here in Canada.
It's because I got to mute it, because then we'll end up getting the double clap back. So I'll give you one more question. We gotta let people get involved too that are watching.
Right on.
So is there any questions for those who are watching right now for Ricky as we veer towards the end of this? I know that there was one where it said, "Oh, gee, man, you got to make a movie." That's from Freedom is a Must.
There you go.
Have you been interested in doing a movie?
Yeah, a lot of people. Last week I was meeting. I've been talking to movie people for almost 2-3 years now. My book's been out for 5 years, so for 3 years there've been movie types always, and I'm really standoffish. I don't have the ego for it. I know what people say. I don't need to see myself on screen doing what I did. It may be interesting to someone else because they didn't do it, but I friggin' did it. I don't need to see my best friend shot. I don't need to see my son handed to me at 4 days old in Millhaven. I got a picture of it. He was only 4 days old when she came up and said, "This is your son. Check him out." You know, I don't need to see that on screen. He doesn't need to see himself on screen. However, I did a lot of exciting stuff from a movie perspective. We rock and rolled for a lot of years. I robbed over 100 banks, but I also robbed jewelry stores and fur stores and art stores. We done all that stuff. I loan sharked. I worked for the mob collecting debts. I did a lot of stuff. I did the Black Panther stuff. So there's lots of stuff that makes it interesting.
So in other words, they got to get the book. People got to go out and get the book. You want to hear that story, right?
Exactly.
Chapter.
The book is the story. Don't wait for the book. Don't wait for the movie. The book's more interesting. For sure. But a movie's coming. It's because I got too many people now hitting on me, and they're offering this and they're offering that, and I'm like, yeah. I've heard it before anyways. I jumped these hurdles before. So we'll see within the next, I would say 4 months. You'll know if I'm going to lock on to, because I got a bunch of big people hitting me up. I might cave in. I might not be able to resist their offers. So yeah, I see your lips moving, but I can't hear you.
Sorry,
I hear you now.
Sorry, Freedom is a Must asked us is if we're interested in, or if you're interested in speaking publicly. I'm not sure exactly
that's
who
my
you're talking
thing.
about, Ricky.
Man, I like that the most. And I tell you, I do that. It gives me this feeling. I remember when I was in Frontenac, and they asked me to go speak in a school in Kingston. And I go, "How old are the kids?" And they went, "Grade 1." And I went, "I'm in," because in grade 1, I started my criminal career. We formed a gang in grade 1. I talk about it in my book. And here's the thing. All the guys that hung in the gang in grade 1 and stayed in that gang went to the penitentiary with me. Think of that. My grade 1 buddies ended up in the penitentiary with me. We rolled through from grade 1 all the way up. So I could say you are who you hang with. Be careful of your associates. That's what I say to kids in grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Oh, we're not getting no sound. Hang on.
Testing. 1, 2, 3. No sound from me? Yeah. Just to. Okay, I can't see stuff.
Hello, you hear me?
I hear you. I can't see what people.
There you are. There you are. Yeah, we're here. We're good.
Freedom's a must, brother. All power to the
Freedom's a must, brother. All power to the people.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. There's somebody who said a movie would be great, but I understand not wanting to see it played out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And normally when guys like me die, people make movies because then you can't argue about what's true and what's not true. And my book's pretty accurate. I name names in my book because the people did this stuff. They're in the newspapers. So guys say, why you put me in the book? I said, because you're in the newspaper. It's already public knowledge. I didn't change anything. I didn't embellish anything. I didn't have to add anything. As a matter of fact, I lowered stuff down so that individuals didn't seem as insane or as crazy in doing the shit that we did. I always made myself look as crazy as I was. Right? So I never shied away from my own psychopathy or my own insanity. Yeah.
Yes. Right here, there's especially in structured intervention units, offender activity report.
Yeah, we all get those reports.
Yeah, we all get those reports.
But they're redacted, blocked out. We don't, even if you go to the Freedom of Information and you try to access them, you'll get 30 pages and you can't read but 2 of them. And I get those all the time, man. Yeah, so it's not like it's new. Organized crime,
Organized crime,
Let me
guys.
educate them.
Yeah, organized crime.
There's 2 of them.
Guys,
So there's 2 of them.
Yeah.
There's one that you can get from IEDP, independent external decision makers.
Yep.
And there's one that every inmate have the right to get. There's that one with the IEDM is considered higher one than other inmates.
Yeah.
So how long you come out of your cell? How long do you have what's it called, yards?
Yeah.
What do the guards say to you? Like a situation like when guards talk to you, they have to write a report every fucking move you make.
You know what? That started. It started what was it they called the living unit concept. And guards had great. So what it is they needed more help in writing their reports. So they took guards that had grade 12 and up and created the living unit. It was happening in 1983. So they created a living unit concept. The guards at the time who were in the living units, they didn't have to have guard uniforms. That didn't last long because the other guards were jealous that these guards were wearing street clothes. There was fights in the parking lot where you're a con lover, and they would fight each other. Don't call me a con lover, blah, blah, blah. So they took the unit, but they left the living unit concept. And that's the remnants thereof. It's the living unit concept where now they started to write more about us. If the guards only wrote, if you, so-and-so smashed the window, we're going to talk to him about it. He agreed to pay $3 for the window. Court stuff.
So you know about double dooring, right?
The who?
You know about double dooring, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, when you have guards admitting that they're double dooring right here and saying that what's it called? They made a mistake the other night. This is what you call real evidence of CSC.
Yeah. So the whole thing about the mistakes, your mistakes in those files, right? You can see that they made a mistake. It's hard because they redact them, but they do make mistakes, and you can hold them accountable for those mistakes, at least from a federal position.
Thank you. It's considered a lack of knowledge.
Yeah, that's what federal court's for. And if you can get to federal court, they remedy those kinds of mistakes. So there's guys that. But here's the thing: the federal court is open to us, but it's not such an easy hurdle to jump. It costs money, and then you get a lot of heat from the administration from going in that direction. Oh, what are you putting a lawsuit against me? Yeah, I'm putting a lawsuit against you because you screwed up. So I had a parole officer that said, I had a parole officer just a few years ago, a black one, she goes, I'm from the Jane and Finch area, as if that mattered to me. And she goes, someone told me that I will sue you if you do something that hurts me or my family. In other words, if you make a mistake in your job that causes me more time or more pain, of course I'm going to sue you to have that removed. And she goes, but why would I do that? And I go, I don't know. Why would you? And she goes, I have no beef to pick with you. And I said, I'm glad you said that. Because as long as our relationship stays that way, then you never have to worry about me. It's only the ones that do stupid shit like what you're talking about that have to have that fear of, you can take them to federal court, you can sue them, you can get compensation, you can get redress, you can get stuff overturned, you can make stuff happen, but you have to know how to play the game.
I think we have viewers that are saying that the volume's bad. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I can hear that double talk.
Are you guys able to hear Ricky?
I hear
We get some feedback from the viewers.
I hear schizophrenia on the phone. It's like I'm hearing myself twice. How about now? Speak? Yeah, I don't hear you.
I think this is coming to an end now.
But I hear the double down.
I think they're gonna have to get a part 3, guys.
Is that it?
Because we ain't finished.
We run out of time. Okay, man, it's nice talking to you. Cool again.
Hey, say their names, man. These injustices.
Right, man. Say their names.
We want to free up, man.
Exactly.
Free Philip Atkins. Free Tyshawn Riley.
Right on, brothers. Take it easy, man. And keep hope alive. That's the key to successful parole. You've got to keep hope alive. You can't say to yourself, there's no hope. I might as well go back, or fuck it, I might as well commit a crime, pick up a gun, do what I got to do. Yeah, you got to keep hope alive. There's always hope for the living. But I'm going to say this. A righteous man always walks further than a non-righteous man. That's a fact. Because more people are willing to help a righteous man than a non-righteous man. So us crooks, we seek help, especially when we're getting out. It's hard to get because people don't look at us as righteous men yet. You have to prove yourself on the street. I've been 10 years on the street, and I'm still not looked at as that righteous man by a lot of people. They're still skeptical because of my history. And I know that, so I just keep hope alive, and I keep pushing through.
Okay, there's a question here. It says, my 12-year-old son wants to know why you continue doing crime after the first time you got caught and did time. Because
I didn't do crime to make money. I did crime to be somebody and to pay back the people that messed with me before. So I was a bully. And I continue, crime is bullying. The type of crime we do, you bully someone when you steal from them, but you bully them more when you rob them. It's being a bully. So I enjoyed being a criminal bully. And it was hard to stop me from doing that. So my first, second, third, fourth, fifth penitentiary sentence still didn't stop me from being a bully. I was such a bully that I had 20 guys bully with me and go to jail with me over and over again. I was that much of a bully. And that's why it didn't work for me. As soon as I said to myself that I should stop bullying people, i.e. robbing them, and I promised a CAC guy that went to bat for me, a Citizen Advisory Committee guy, Bill Dundee, that I would never do another robbery. And once those words came out of my mouth, I'm a man of my word, I never did another robbery after that. I got involved in a major drug conspiracy. I said to my wife at the time, I will never do that again. And my words are my bond, so I will never do that again in the respect I have for her. So that's what caused me to change. It's just being truthful to myself and saying that I'm not going to do these things no more. And then no matter what comes at me, figuring out how can I navigate that. The hardest thing to do on parole, because it's all ego-based, us criminals are all ego-based. We have these big egos. As I was on parole going to my first meeting from the halfway house, and I stopped in a park. I watched a guy boxing, training some girls, and he stopped training the girls. I thought I was on a TV show, I'm telling you, man. He come up to me and he said, hey, stop looking at those girls or I'll punch your head in. And I said to myself, hey, you don't know how to fight that good, pal. But I just got into jail, and the energy in me would explode upon you in a way that you wouldn't expect. I could wipe you off the face of this earth in 2 seconds. And I said to myself, should I attack this guy and destroy him? Or should I go to my meeting? Because people were waiting. It was my first meeting, and they all helped try to get me out. So for them, I didn't hurt this person. And that is the hardest thing to do, to suck it up. Because you're going to get challenged when you're out there. And it's your ego that says no. So and I put in my book several times, cops pulled me over and they pushed my ego. They threatened me. They threatened to shoot at me or something. And my ego kicked in, screw you, and back in it I was again. And that's what it's all about, man. And that's why I didn't stop, because my ego was too big and I was still a bully, a criminal bully. And that's the way it was.
All right, Ricky, we love you, man. It's not
Okay,
over,
peace
man.
out, man.
It's not
Peace
over.
out, man.
Power to the people.
Power to
And
the people.
don't stop
world.
struggling
Thanks for the
for your rights,
For your rights.
for freedom and the rights of others. Don't stop being like Richard Mills. Richard Mills, man, he's got a lot of mad respect for me because I see where he's going and where he's headed and what he's doing and how he's pushing this wave of energy forward to make this change that's needed in our correctional system. Will he last? I don't know. They have ways of destroying guys like him. Will they funnel and feed him? I doubt it. He has to do it on his own because they never fed and fed someone in his position before. It would be the first time in Canadian history that they actually paid someone what they're worth to help the people that are inside. So it's
Hell no, he's
so
doing
it's-
it out of his pocket, like union money, like.
Exactly, even to go travel places. You mad respect for him because he reminds me of Bed Folks, who did the same thing for us for lots of years, and Dudley Laws, who did the same thing for us, and all the other guys that do that. The Guns and Gangs guy, just his name just jumped out of my head right now, but yeah, he runs the Guns and Gangs program. Louis Marsh. Another guy that just pushes in there where he's in every community every time something happens at his own expense, just trying to be a shoulder to lean on and offer some wisdom and some help. Yeah, that's what.
Hey Rick, there's people that are showing love in the comments. They're saying, "My son appreciates your wisdom." We got Freedom is a Must and 100 Black Power. He had one question regarding your transition. What was the most difficult thing you faced after?
Adjusting to society is not hard to do because we're malleable. Adjusting to the game that has to be played when you're on parole and you're part of the system, like the other brother mentioned. They mark I had guards sitting in front of my cell inside institutions all night. Every breath I took was marked down. Everything I did was marked down. I went through that. I had that kind of scrutiny on me for a long time. The whole thing is it's not water off a duck's back. You can't look at it that way. You have to look at it that you're playing a game of chess for your life and the welfare of your family. Play the game as best you could. And if that means never committing another crime, then do that. If it means moving your pawns or your men to different cities so that you could survive, then move to those different cities and do that. Don't hunker down in your anger and then relish in your anger. Over time, it destroys you and everybody that around you. Free up, man. Free up. Free your ass. Free your mind. Your ass will follow, man. It's as simple as that. That's it. I can't hear you guys now. Your guys are out on me. You're in now. I can hear you now. Yeah. Yeah. I hear you now. Cool again. Now you're out. I see your lips moving, but I don't hear a word you say. I hear you now.
I hear you now.
We appreciate your wisdom and your honesty on giving advices to younger black male.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate what you're saying because you've been through it.
So the absence of fathers in our community, for whatever reason, fathers are absent, then other communities leaders have to take up that slack and do fatherly things. Just mentoring. Just be there listen to somebody, man. That's usually all it takes. But all the times I was happy on parole is when I had parole officers that would just listen. I know they couldn't help me much, but at least I knew they weren't shutting me down. They were listening, and I could vent. I had a way out. And then the ones that did listen, it was like, then screw you too. I robbed a bank in the parole office once, but they weren't listening to me, and there was a bank on the bottom floor of the parole office in the West End. So one day I told my guys, next time I'm in seeing my parole officer, you guys robbed that bank. And they did. So she goes, I know you had nothing to do with that bank robbery because you were sitting here in front of me. And then years later, the guy that robbed that bank ratted me out. So now they know that that's the kind of thinking that I do. If you push me, I push back really hard in a different manner. That's all ego. So yeah.
But that was back then. reacting negative with negative and not getting
Exactly.
positive.
That's the thing. You got to take the
but in our
negative
heads,
and turn it into
but
a positive.
in our heads, it's like a bed mass. We thought
Yeah.
we were gonna make positive.
Yeah, you got it, man. Yeah, that's flipping your switch. Here's what I say. My podcast on, I only did 10 podcast shows last year, but it was called Flip Your Switch. They're on YouTube. And my whole thing is the sooner you flip the switch, because that woman, whoever asked the question, why didn't I? After the first time, it took me 10 times before I flipped my switch. My brother, after his first time in the pen, he flipped his switch and never looked back. And a lot of guys do that. Their first lesson is the lesson that takes. They flip their switch back, and they're no longer into criminal activity. Me, my switch kept flipping one way or the other. It was a real loose dial throughout the 30, 40 years that I was working. So it would flip one way, and I'd be good for a while, and then something would trigger me that would flip back, and off I'd go doing these crazy things that I was doing, you know. So the thing is it's hard to do parole because it's a sentence, and you're still doing the sentence. You're still under the sentence that you were in while you were inside. That's the best way to look at it. Your sentence will end one day if you're not a lifer, and then this stuff will be behind you. If you're a lifer, welcome to my world. You play that game forever, man. Or until and I'm not a lifer. I'm just, they call me, even guards call me the lifer. That's not because of my sentence is so big, right? So, yeah, man.
Well, you learn a lot. Well, you learn a lot when you're in there, and
yeah, there's
the wisdom you have to.
There's two schools in prison. You can take the school that successfully can get you out into the business world, or you could take the school that gets you out into the criminal world. And I say, because I don't bullshit anybody, I know criminals who are successful criminals. So if you tell me I'm only going to be a criminal, I say to I hope you're the one of the successful ones. But then I say to you, a successful criminal is rarer than someone you know who won $50 million in the lotto. They are rarer than the lotto winner, a successful criminal. Although I know them, just like I know lotto winners. Would I want to be with you as you gamble towards this windfall as a criminal? No, I don't want to be with you. I've been there and I've done it, man. And it's not worth the gamble. So the thing is if you elect to still maintain your criminal attitude, I say, good luck to you. I wouldn't want to be you. And keep in mind, when you read my book, we're at the top of this friggin' criminal game. We took over an island, and the guys in the island were running the show. That's as high as you can go. That's as big as you can go in the criminal world. I was looking at thousands of kilos coming into the country. And then it didn't work out for me. I got the biggest sentence in Canadian history. And my co-accused is doing 2 life, no paroles in the United States. He's never, ever going to get out. So it didn't work out for us. At the top of the game, it doesn't work out either. Name a successful gang boss that you've heard of. As soon as you've heard of him, he became non-successful because you heard of him. It's just the way it is. That's the game. Yeah.
You're right.
So.
And we appreciate everything else, but we want to know one more thing about prison as well. Is it going to change? The question is for me: is it going to change in the meanwhile, or is it still going to history repeats itself?
In 1971, our prison system changed because they had a riot that forced it to change. In 1981, 82, our prison system changed because the Charter of Rights offered more freedoms and outs for the people. Since 1981, our prison system hasn't changed one iota. It's still the same system without much change. So the government and the population in this country have to wake up. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars can be saved just by waking up and saying that when you sentence a person to prison, he is within 99% going to come back out. And because of that one concept that he is going to come back out, start the rehabilitative process instantly so that when he comes out, he's better off than when he went in. If you start the rehabilitative progress too late, that individual comes out broken and costs society more money. It's a no-brainer, man. So in our Canadian prison system, they have started to take away the old mentality. In other words, when you come in, sometimes the warden will appear and shake your hand and say, I'm here to help you. If you have any problems, put in a request and I'll answer your request. That's a game changer from a warden sitting in his office, running the show like he's God. And you have no redress except violence and stuff like that. So that's the game changer here. Eventually, because of cost, if we reject the American prison system, our prison system is turning. It's not turning fast enough towards the Northern European system where we can shut jails down because we don't have enough people going in them, rather than building super jails that we want to put more people in no matter who they are and what crimes they committed, because the jails are there and the unions are strong and demand bodies in the jail. And they say to the cops, we have empty beds, go fill them. And the cop says, but people they're not committing crime. Make crime happen so we can put people in our jail system. That's the game, and that's got to stop. It's got to stop being a business.
The taxpayers'
Yeah,
money every year.
It's got to stop
$200,000 each inmate.
Yeah,
Each inmate, $200,000.
yeah,
Violation
over
or not.
Over that, yeah. And so when I look at
Federal,
I cost them millions of dollars. I stole millions of dollars. But I also cost them $1 million in correcting me. But I also brought 50 guys with me to jail. So that's millions times 50. So had they been able to treat me at an earlier age, then I would have stopped those 50 guys from coming with me. Would have saved them millions of dollars. But that didn't happen. And they have to make it happen for the other guys. In order to save
OG, appreciate your wisdom.
Okay, right on,
Thank
man.
you.
So we said we're leaving
You know
like
what I'm
4 times
I've been
now,
in
so
8
let's leave.
years. I've been in 8 years, so I feel your pain on that 10 years. You know what I'm saying? I have a lot of knowledge too.
Yeah, I got
And a
30,
lot of-
I got 35 in, and the rest was on parole. So I've been on.
Yeah, you did the time to understand and visualize, analyze.
Exactly.
You did good, man.
All right.
Well, nice talking to you, and I'll add you on your Instagram.
Okay, great.
Thank you, brother.
All right.
Yeah, brother.
See you.
All right. It ain't over. We're gonna do this again.
Yeah, anytime.
Anytime.
It's organic.
More
That's
stuff. We
another
could talk
thing.
about. We could talk about kids programs in jail, sports programs in jail, drug interdiction programs in jail. I remember the AIDS program, the medical programs. Lots of stuff to talk about.
Lots of stuff to talk about.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, cool.
All right. Let's get it.
Okay, cool.